You almost didn't exist. Not you personally. All of you. Every single human being alive on Earth today. There was a moment, roughly 70,000 years ago, when the entire human population collapsed to somewhere between 1,000 and 10,000 individuals. That's not a city. That's not a town. That's a small village. A single stadium. The entire species compressed into a number so small that scientists still debate whether our ancestors should have made it out at all. And the strangest part, nobody knows for certain what caused it. This is the story of the bottleneck. The near-extinction event that almost ended humanity before it had a chance to begin. And once you understand what happened, you'll never look at yourself the same way. Start with the world as it was. 75,000 years ago, your ancestors were scattered across Africa in small bands. They were not primitive. Do not picture them that way. These were people with language, with social bonds, with tools, with fire, with memory. Researcher Curtis Marian at Arizona State University has found evidence that some of these groups were already trading resources and forming complex alliances along the South African coast. These were fully modern human minds operating inside ancient bodies. And then the sky changed. On the Indonesian island of Sumatra, a supervolcano called Toba erupted. The date is estimated at approximately 74,000 years ago. And when scientists say erupted, they mean something that has no modern equivalent. The Toba eruption was approximately 5,000 times more powerful than the 1980 eruption of Mount St. Helens. It released so much ash and sulfur dioxide into the atmosphere that it triggered what researchers call a volcanic winter. Sunlight was blocked, temperatures dropped, crops that didn't exist yet couldn't grow. Animals that your ancestors depended on died. The African landscape, already challenging, became something close to a wasteland. Stanley Ambrose at the University of Illinois was one of the first researchers to formally connect the Toba eruption to the human genetic bottleneck. His hypothesis, published in 1998, proposed that the volcanic winter killed off most of the human population, that it reduced your ancestors to a tiny, scattered remnant of survivors clinging to a handful of habitable refuges, that everything you are descended from a population so small it would struggle to fill a modern apartment complex. The genetic evidence is striking. When scientists sequence human DNA from populations around the world, they find something unusual. Humans have remarkably low genetic diversity. Compared to chimpanzees, who share roughly 99% of your DNA, the genetic variation within the entire human species is actually smaller. Two chimpanzees living in the same forest can be more genetically distinct from each other than you are from someone born on the opposite side of the planet. That is the footprint of a bottleneck. That is the signature of a species that almost blinked out. Think about what that means for a moment. Every person you have ever seen, every face in a crowd, every stranger on a street, every historical figure from every civilization that has ever existed. All of them, all of us, descended from that tiny knot of survivors. The genetic instructions inside your body right now were carried through one of the narrowest passages in the history of life on Earth. But here is where it gets complicated, because not everyone agrees on the story. Archaeologist Michael Petraglia at the Max Planck Institute for the Science of Human History has challenged the Toba catastrophe hypothesis directly. His team has found stone tools in India that appear both below and above the Toba ash layer, suggesting that human or human-like populations in South Asia survived the eruption and continued living through it. If the volcanic winter was truly extinction level for humans, how did those tool makers persist? The debate is not settled. Science rarely is. What researchers agree on is that something caused the bottleneck. The genetic signal is undeniable. At some point, the population collapsed. Whether Toba pulled the trigger or simply accelerated an existing decline, the result was the same. Your ancestors were reduced to a handful, and from that handful, something remarkable happened. Small populations do strange and unpredictable things genetically. When a group is tiny, random mutations can spread rapidly, or vanish just as fast. Traits that would be diluted in a large population become fixed. This is called genetic drift, and it means that the survivors of the bottleneck weren't just lucky. They were changed by the experience of surviving it. Think about the behaviors that would have kept your ancestors alive during a volcanic winter. The ability to cooperate under extreme stress, the willingness to share food when food was almost gone, the capacity to innovate when old solutions stopped working, the social intelligence to maintain alliances with other groups even when resources were desperately scarce. Curtis Marian's research suggests that the survivors likely clustered near coastlines, where the marine ecosystem was more stable than the interior. Shellfish, seaweed, fish, resources that weren't dependent on sunlight the way land-based ecosystems were. Your earliest ancestors may have survived because they were willing to eat things that other hominins ignored or hadn't learned to exploit. The people who made it through were not the biggest, not the fastest, Not necessarily the most physically powerful. They were the most human. And here is the part that tends to stop people when they hear it. After the bottleneck, after the population collapsed to its lowest point, something changed in the behavior of your ancestors. The archaeological record shows a sudden flowering of what researchers call behavioral modernity. Symbolic thinking, art, long-distance trade, the use of ochre as body paint, personal ornaments, artifacts that suggest abstract thought, identity, and culture. Some researchers believe this wasn't a coincidence. They argue that the bottleneck itself, the pressure of near extinction, may have acted as a selection pressure that accelerated certain traits, that the survivors who rebuilt the species were disproportionately drawn from groups with the cognitive and social tools to survive the impossible, that you are, in a real sense, descended from the people who were good enough at being human to stay alive when almost no one did. Not everyone accepts this interpretation either. The debate continues, but the pattern is there in the record. Collapse, then explosion. Near extinction, then expansion. Because here's what happened after. Once the volcanic winter lifted, once the skies cleared and temperatures recovered, the survivors didn't just persist, they spread. They moved out of Africa and into Arabia, into South Asia, across Southeast Asia, eventually into Australia, Europe, and the Americas. They replaced or absorbed every other hominin population they encountered. Neanderthals, Denisovans, others whose names we may never know. Within 60,000 years of the bottleneck, modern humans had colonized almost every habitable landmass on Earth. The most successful biological expansion in the history of a large-brained species, driven by a population that had almost ceased to exist. There is a concept in evolutionary biology called the founder effect. When a small group becomes the origin point for a much larger population, the traits of that small group get amplified across all descendants. Your values, your psychology, your capacity for language and empathy and creativity, these didn't emerge in a vacuum. They were selected for, honed, amplified across thousands of generations, starting from a moment when your entire ancestral line could have fit in a single small village. The fears you carry, the social instincts that make you need other people, the restlessness that has always pushed humans to cross one more mountain, sail one more ocean, build one more thing. These are not accidents. These are the inheritance of survivors. You are here because of people who did not give up when everything collapsed around them. You almost didn't exist. But the ones who made sure you would, they were exactly the kind of people who would. If you found the video interesting, leave a like and subscribe so that you don't have to wander around.